Too much pot tar.
Way too much pod tar.
As I look at the Brewers offseason as a whole, I don't really think they anticipate getting a lot from Ryan Braun in what may be his last season. He did have a quote the other day at the Fan Fest, I think a week or so ago, where he suggested this might be his last year. So I think the Brewers are kind of game planning for we may not get, an excellent final season from Ryan Braun.
Welcome back to another episode of Too Much Pod Tar, as we continue our 30 teams on 30 pods series, and this is going to be with the Brewers. And I have Brewers fan Zac Bellman on for this podcast.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for coming on. And so, first off, to start off, I just want to talk about last season. The Brewers finished second in the NL Central, and made it as a wild card, and then obviously they ended up falling to the Washington Nationals, eventual World Series champion, in that wild card game. So that was a tough one for you guys to swallow, because they came back and ended up being that Soto bases clearing hit that ended up winning the game for them. So. But I mean, I guess it makes you feel better since they ended up going on to win it all anyway.
Definitely. I mean, to lose to the eventual World Series champion is a little bit of a silver lining into the season overall. But I think the season overall, to minimize it to the wild card game is kind of is not quite looking at the season for a whole. I think it was a really interesting season for the Brewers. Especially what they were just coming off of, because they were in the NLCS a year before, a game away from the World Series against the Dodgers in a Game 7 at home. And, going into 2019, I think this was a team that felt that they were a player away, and they picked up what they thought was that player in Yasmani Grandal. And as the season transpired, it got rather interesting as some of the guys that they counted on that got them to that NLCS in 2018 really fell off the map. I mean, there were four All-Stars going into 2019 that were returning from the team in 2018. And among them were Jesus Aguilar, Jeremy Jeffress, Lorenzo Cain, and Josh Hader. And of those four All-Stars from 2018, two are off the team as of now, and one regressed significantly in 2019. Jesus Aguilar, first of all, was one of the leaders in home runs. He had 274 with 35 home runs, and was hitting just over 200 with dipping power numbers before he was traded to the Rays for Jacob Faria. And then Jeremy Jeffress went from an all-star reliever in 2018 with 8 wins and 15 saves in relief to falling off the face of the earth with an ERA just over 5. He was designated for assignment, and the Cubs just picked him up about a week ago. And Lorenzo Cain is the leadoff hitter. After making the All-Star team in 2018, dropped from a 308 average to a 260 average, which was his worst since 2013. And Travis Shaw, another guy for them that was among their leaders in home runs with 32 in 2018, completely lost his bat in 2019, hitting 157 and getting sent back a couple times down to the minors. I could keep going. I don't want to monopolize the conversation here, Alex, but you get a sense for how they lost some of their bats that really got them to that NLCS. And it's really interesting to sit here and be talking about a team that still made the playoffs when so many key contributors from 2018, did not have much of an impact in 2019.
Yeah, exactly. There's definitely solid points. And then another big thing was they obviously lost Yelich for the last couple of weeks of the season. So being able to still make the wild card game even when he was down, that's big too.
Absolutely, and for them down the stretch, I mean, it was actually more about the pitching. Obviously, you think about the offensive losses of Yelich on the offensive end being an MVP and having that was one of my things that I had for things that went right for the Brewers in 2019 was the fact that Yelich had as good, if not better, of a year and was well on his way, I think, to at least being in the conversation, if not taking a second consecutive MVP away from Cody Bellinger before going down there. And obviously, he had offensive contributions from the guy who took his spot and then made that critical error in the wild card, Trent Grisham.
Mhm.
But you also had Keston Hiura, who was a fringe Rookie of the Year candidate after appearing in only 84 games. He hit 19 home runs and finished the season with a 303 average. That guy can hit. He's going to be a middle of the order guy for this team for a long time to come. And Yasmani Grandal obviously had a big year, hitting 28 homers while driving in 77. He had an OBP of 380 thanks to 109 walks on the season. Unfortunately, the Brewers were priced out of keeping him as he went to the White Sox, but
Mhm.
I mean, he delivered on that 1 year contract that they signed him to for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely. He was a big piece, and it's definitely a big loss for them. They really like if I obviously going to talk about more of the offseason in a little while, but that's kind of like a big thing for this Brewers team. They kind of seems like they really haven't done anything. They just lost guys. Like they lost Moustakas as well, and they also lost Grandal. So I mean, in that division right now, I'm honestly I think the Reds are like it's a possibility the Reds can win that division because been making moves this offseason, and the Cubs and Brewers really haven't done anything. So
Yeah, absolutely. On paper, it's been kind of a tough one to reconcile as you see, the Reds making move after move. Obviously, Castellanos, I think, was the big pickup for them recently in the last week or so. Plus, they've got an infield full of guys that can hit. They got Aquino coming back. I mean, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with up and down their lineup. But I think what was interesting for the Brewers, I guess as we segue into the offseason discussion here is um, they, yeah, I kind of look at them and I'm kind of like, this is my nickname, I think, for them this year is going to be the Budget Brewers because
mm,
they kind of, stop short of making the big free agent splash. But if you
right.
look at a little bit closer at some of the guys that they picked up, I think they got some guys that could really contribute this year. And they also kind of fill out their depth in the minor leagues, which is not, a great farm system, but they got a bunch of guys on minor league deals that could potentially contribute to this team yet this year or provide necessary depth for a 162 game season. So I think there are some guys that aside from the big splash, which I don't think they have quite the budget to make or didn't feel like making. I think there are some guys that will contribute absolutely for sure this season. Namely, I think one of the big acquisitions that I'm kind of excited about was the trade for Omar Narvaez, the catcher from, I believe he was with Seattle. And he was traded for right-handed pitcher Adam Hill and a competitive balanced draft pick. That's a nice lefty bat to have out of the catcher spot. And what's interesting is I think that dynamic at catcher will be a little bit more even because the Brewers 2 years ago got fairly decent production from Manny Pena out of the primary catcher role as a right-handed bat 2 years ago. But then with Grandal taking up most of that playing time, um, it really cut into Pena's ability to get at bats. And I think what you'll see this year from the Brewers, is specifically at the catcher position, is a more even split of that righty lefty matchup. And I don't think that will entirely replace Grandal's production, but I think Navar, Narvaez, sorry. Um, Narvaez's bat will play very well at Miller Park, I believe. I think he had what 22 home runs last year for Seattle, and that is not the shortest right field fence there for them. So I think he was a good pickup. Another offensive guy they picked up was outfielder Avisail Garcia.
Right.
They signed him to a 2 year deal, and I think that one kind of flew under the radar
Mhm.
for them. And I think he'll be kind of a plug and play left fielder for them, and maybe get a little bit of time spelling Lorenzo Cain in center field. And he's another 20 homer guy and a guy who hits for decent average as well. He had 282 with 20 homers last season. So that's another guy who I think is gonna as as I look at the Brewers offseason as a whole, I don't really think they anticipate getting a lot from Ryan Braun in what may be his last season. He did have a quote the other day at the Fan Fest, I think a week or so ago, where he suggested this might be his last year. So I think the Brewers are kind of game planning for we may not get, an excellent final season from Ryan Braun. So they are kind of filling out the rest of the team accordingly with some of these free agents to kind of spell him in left field because he hasn't been a guy to threaten 162 as far as playing all the whole season the last couple of years, kind of dealing with injuries and whatnot. So, I think Garcia is going to be a great addition to kind of even out that outfield. But as you said, I mean, not really a ton of big name players, but some guys that will definitely fill spots for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think, as you mentioned, Garcia there. I think he'll be really solid. As you mentioned, he's another 20 home run guy. He definitely give you production. So
Mhm.
I can definitely see that. And obviously, is with Braun as well, and maybe not playing as much. I can see him playing the outfield a lot and giving
Mhm.
like giving solid production.
And I think the general theme for David Stearns, the general manager, has just been, let's get some budget bats who will play well at Miller Park. And I think that was just kind of what as you look down the list of some of the other guys that they picked up, one of the other guys I'm kind of excited about is Justin Smoke. They picked him up in free agency on a 1 year deal. He's a switch hitting bat who will, I think, kind of, be another guy that helps replace some of the production at first base, both from Eric Thames, who they lost, as well as some of the production from the middle of the order that they were seeing from Grandal. Another switch hitting bat hit 22 home runs for Toronto last year in a pretty big park out there. So I think he's another guy who could, be in that 25, 28 home run range. I think that's a pretty optimistic prognostication for him. And he hits for a little bit more average than Eric Thames, who he'll be replacing for sure. So, a couple good options that they picked up that I think are, you know, maybe under the radar signings, but bats that I think will play very well at Miller Park. A couple others that they signed, Ryan Healy. They picked up Jed Jerko as a corner infielder. And Eric Sogard returns to Milwaukee. Nerd Power is coming back to Milwaukee as Eric Sogard will be returning on a 1 year deal as well. So, a couple bats. I think the general philosophy for David Stearns over his time, as much as Brewer fans want to kind of be in denial about this and wonder why we don't chase the big name like Strasburg or Madison Bumgarner, I think the general theme for GM David Stearns over the past few years is let's not spend high value assets, whether it be big contracts or significant trade value on starting pitching. I think this is a team that is very much built to get 5, maybe 6 innings out of a starter and then just go right into the bullpen, which, worked for them very well. I think 2 years ago, I think it worked well enough for them to get 89 wins this season, but it's kind of been the MO for the Brewers over the last couple of years.
Yeah, definitely. It's obviously worked before on other teams, so if they can continue using that philosophy, I think they'll be successful. Because teams do it a lot now, especially in the game now. And these it's changing. Like you don't usually see like 8 innings or 9 innings from a start anymore, unless
Hmm.
unless you're like Garrett Cole or whatever, Justin Verlander, something like
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are those guys that can do that, and it's such an asset to have a team that has one of those guys, which is why, the pipe dream kind of was the Brewers chasing after one of those guys, whether it be Baumgartner or Strasburg or even some of these second or I guess A2 or 1A kind of categories, whether it be Dallas Keuchel or Hyun-Jin Ryu, a couple of those other starters that were out there in free agency this year. But I can respect that David Stearns has stuck to his philosophy, which is just not spending high value assets on starting pitching. Kind of segueing the conversation into moves I wish they would have made. Uh, Obviously picking up or re-signing either Mike Moustakas or Yasmani Grandal was kind of up there as far as one of the things that I would have liked to seen either or of those guys. I didn't really expect both, but it would have been nice to have one because they do leave two gaping holes in that lineup, whether it be at third base or a catcher. I mean that was offensive production that they had a catcher that they have not had since the prime years, I think, of Jonathan Lucroy for Milwaukee, and that was such an asset for this team to have a power hitting switch catcher. Um, I thought that was a guy that they should have, thrown whatever they could at, but obviously, got priced out of it. Some people wanted Josh Donaldson at third. I didn't think he was a great fit for them. He ends up going to the Twins, I believe. And I didn't think that was quite the guy, to fit for them. But as you look at the Brewers kind of, projected lineup for the infield, I mean, they're going to have an almost entirely different infield that they had from opening day. One of the other acquisitions that they made was a trade in late November, right around Thanksgiving they traded Trent Grisham and Zach Davies, their starter, for Luis Urias and Eric Lauer of the Padres. And Urias is quite a hitting prospect, it sounds like. He had a bat that was graded very highly among scouts. So I think, and the quote from David Stearns after that trade was, we wanted some more production out of the shortstop position. So he kind of called out Orlando Arcia for his relative lack of production from the shortstop position offensively. He's been a great defender over the years, but not quite what they're looking for offensively. So, it would have been nice to see the Brewers go for kind of a third baseman. I don't know if they project Urias to take that third baseman role. I know he just sustained a wrist injury that he got surgery for. I believe he's due back about a week prior to opening day, but they'll probably give him, plenty of time to make sure that he's ready before throwing him in the lineup. Um, but Arias will be an interesting addition to that infield. Obviously, Keston Hira will be back at second. But then you got at first base, it sounds like they're going to platoon Ryan Braun in there with some combination of either Justin Smoke, Jed Jerko plays a little bit of first, I believe, and Ryan Healy, maybe in that conversation as well. It's really interesting. The Brewers picked up a lot of guys who they're not going to have space for. So a couple of them are on minor league deals, and will obviously be, come up some of those guys that are the first phone call from the minors if somebody goes down. So they'll have plenty of depth. But it's going to be some interesting cuts as far as the 25-man roster coming out of camp this year.
Oh yeah, just it actually is now 26 this year. They changed it to.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that'd be interesting.
It'll be 26 in the whole season, and then September instead of 40, it'll be like I think it's 28. So
yeah, I heard they were getting rid of the 40 man expanded rosters, but having one more will be interesting. Especially, I think that's a move that favors the Brewers, quite frankly, because of the way they like to run their team. That gives them an extra reliever that they can rotate in and out, and or an extra bench bat if one of these guys that they signed to a minor league deal, they want him for an at bat or something like that. A couple of the guys that they brought in on minor league deals included Logan Morrison, first base, corner outfield guy, Jace Peterson, infielder, relief pitcher Justin Grimm, center fielder Keon Broxton, who returns to Milwaukee, relief pitcher Mike Morin, and starting pitcher Shelby Miller, all on minor league deals. So those are guys that you could see up and down, or just filling out the depth this year. So potentially guys that can contribute, especially with that expanded 26-man roster now.
yeah, definitely. I think that's going to be something that helps a lot of teams. They just have like an extra guy to use as platoon kind of guy or whatever it may be. But even like some teams, like if you have like like those a couple teams that have like a two-way guy. They can have that 26 guy is kind of somebody that can pitch or hit.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be different to see how, interesting to see how teams across the league kind of navigate that 26 player because I'm sure that, it's kind of been difficult for teams playing double headers and stuff like that to make a 25-man roster work game to game. So I think that's a good addition for the league and will definitely favor a team like the Brewers that likes to use their depth up and down the lineup.
For sure, yeah. And then just going back to that trade, I think I really like the trade for the Brewers. It was kind of weird, like for the Padres. I don't know why the Padres want to trade for Davies. It's like I think Lauer has more of a ceiling than him.
Mhm.
I think that would have been better for the Padres to keep him, but
Yeah, frankly, and if you look back to Davies' best year, I mean, he got the running joke practically for the broadcast team. I remember that year was like, how much run support is Zach Davies going to get this night? I mean, it was just unreal. I think he led the league actually in run support that year, was near the top of the league at least in run support. It's something like a 15-win season. I don't have that offhand, but
yeah,
he had a great year that year, but it was with a lot of run support. And Grisham, I think, is a very talented hitter. I mean, the Brewers almost barely missed a beat, despite how excellent Christian Yelich is. They weren't plugging in a guy who could hit eighth. I mean, Grisham was a top end of the lineup kind of hitter. And I think they get, a good prospect there for their outfield. And the Padres are going to be definitely a team to reckon with this season with all the moves they made. But I guess Arias wasn't quite in their, plans with, Fernando Tatis Jr. at short. Wasn't really going to give him many opportunities to crack the starting lineup. So I think they just, sold on him and maybe got a guy in Davies who they can kind of round out their rotation for 2020. And, but the Brewers will definitely take it on there. And I thought that was a great move to potentially get some competition and offense in at the shortstop position for sure.
yeah, it should be interesting to see how they move this roster around.
hmm And, going segueing back to the conversation about third base, the one, the other pipe dream move that I was kind of hoping for this offseason, and there were obviously have been rumors throughout the offseason on it, was uh, making a move at third base because, frankly, I mean, you look at their roster right now for third base. I looked at the projected MLB.com third base depth chart, and it has Eric Sogard as the starting third baseman, which boy, if that is the case well into this season, that's a pretty massive hole I think in the lineup, especially defensively, but also compared to Mike Moustakas, I think that's a pretty significant hole at third base for the Brewers that they did not. They're kind of they put some patchwork on it, but didn't quite fill. Then beyond that, you got Jed Jerko, Urias may play some third, but it'll be interesting to see how Arias and Arcia split time or play time together. Ryan Healy also plays a little bit of third, but is not, super, doesn't have a great deal of prowess at third base defensively. So I was kind of hoping that the Brewers might, and obviously this is pipe dream, but might throw a package together for Nolan Arenado at third base. I know he is kind of been in trade talks this whole offseason as the Rockies kind of decide who they are as a team right now. And I was kind of hoping that they might throw something together. And frankly, as far as I was concerned, I was willing to part with Josh Hader as part of that package. And I think other people were talking about Lorenzo Cain being part of that. I don't think that would have been the worst trade to potentially sell high, relatively high on Kane and Hader, and get both those guys out there for a third baseman. I think that would have been you know, a relatively surprising move, but kind of a pipe dream for us as Brewer fans to get that big splash. Because circling back to the offseason as a whole, I think you talk about the moves that the Brewers made a while back about getting Moustakas, getting Yasmani Grandal, the offseason before that in 2018, perhaps what has basically become a holiday for Brewers fans, January 25th of 2018, they pick up Yelich and Kane on the same day, which is, obviously been a incredibly impactful signing and trade for Yelich. And I think Brewer fans collectively we're looking at this offseason, all right, what's going to be the big move this year? Because we've made those big moves the last 2 years and made the playoffs. And, those were only the fifth and sixth postseason appearances for this Brewer team in team history. And, we're kind of getting hungry for that big postseason run again this year, and we see this Yelich window as kind of our window to compete for a title. So we're kind of looking for that big move and didn't quite get it this offseason, but we'll see.
Yeah, there's still a little bit of time, and then also, of course, the trade deadline. They can try to make something happen there too.
Absolutely, yeah. It'll be interesting to see how some of these moves pan out, and I think there is going to be some pressure, especially if that third base position doesn't work out to make a move there, because not having that production could hurt this team. It's going to be kind of an interesting shuffle of the lineup to have a guy that you did have batting in the middle of the lineup in Moustakas to now have that third base position now maybe in the 7-8 position in the lineup, and Sogard potentially. So we'll see how that all turns out. And just to circle back again to Hader as well. I actually, I believe you're a Yankees fan, right, Alex?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was talking about this as we were planning this podcast about. I don't know if you caught much wind of this, but there were kind of some Hader to the Yankees rumors floating around. Were you kind of on board for any of those potential trades, or?
Um, I would be on board to trade for him, but not some of these trades I'm seeing. Like a lot of people are like, when those rumors were circulating, there was a lot of people like making up their own trades and like saying let's trade like whatever Andujar, Garcia. I think one of them mentioned Garcia to David Garcia, the pitching prospects, and like Clint Frazier and a bunch of like they would like. I think they want that. I wouldn't want to give up that much for him.
Yeah, I wonder how serious those discussions actually were, but I think realistically, at minimum, I think it would have cost, a significant contributor at third base, because I think that's, the one hole that they're still looking to fill. But what's interesting, honestly, I wanted the Brewers to make that move, quite frankly. I think Hader is slipping a little bit these past couple of years. I know that's like borderline sacrilege to say about a guy who just won National League Reliever of the Year this past year, but you look at his numbers, and his ERA has gone up each year, only slightly. I think he's up to like 2.6 right now. But he's if you the eyes just tell you um, hitters are not giving that breaking ball of his any respect. He kind of tried to work in his slider a little bit more this year, and guys were either tattooing that or just letting it go, just sitting on that fastball of his. And what's interesting is his home runs allowed went up from 4 in 2017 to 9 in 2018, and he gave up 15 this past year. So, he's kind of a, as many fireballers kind of are, that ball is obviously going to come off the bat with a great deal of velocity. But, those numbers tell me that hitters are just kind of sitting on that fastball, and however deceptive his delivery may be, and with the hair flowing, as I've kind of seen an MLB Network breakdown of how that hair can kind of cause a little bit of more trickery for the hitter in the box. But um, I think hitters are starting to key on that fastball, and I wouldn't have been too upset if the Brewers decided to sell high on him this offseason. It looks like they're going to keep him around, and hopefully he develops that secondary pitch. But I was a little bit worried down the stretch, and obviously, circling back to where this discussion started, that wild card game, that
Hmm.
if you would have told me Brewers what ahead 3-1, I think in the eighth,
Yeah.
with Josh Hader on the mound, I would have taken that 10 times out of 10.
Right.
But it was just a little bit too much for him to handle there in the eighth. And I think that fastball is obviously very deceptive, but is not quite going to do it on its own if hitters are keen on it. So,
Yeah.
um, kind of wish they would have made a move maybe to sell high on him this offseason.
Yeah. It looked like they were really thinking about it for a while. It seemed like, but
Hmm.
I guess they just didn't find the right trade.
Yeah, and I can understand wanting to get as much as you can out of him, but um, I guess for me, going forward as we look at the biggest questions going into camp, I think, among them, obviously, as I mentioned, is third base. I mean, it just feels like a gaping hole for them as far as what they got there. Sogard and Healy will maybe contend for that third base spot with Jerko, as well, maybe getting some playing time. And then as you go around the horn in the infield, you got Arias. Once he gets back from the broken bone in his left wrist, he's projected to be ready by opening day, but it may take longer than that. So, does he eventually take Orlando Arcia's job? Does one of them move to third? I think that's a big question for Brewers fans going in this season. And how I think how Ryan Braun fits into all this will be interesting as well. They flirted first when Yelich actually first came to Milwaukee. They were talking about, how does this work out for Ryan Braun? Is he going to shift to the infield? Um, but they didn't quite get him. I think they got him some spring training reps, but I don't think they gave him much regular season time at first base. But he is definitely making that switch at least part time to first base this season. So how that split works out with him and Justin Smoke, if Justin Smoke really plays well, where does Braun find time in this lineup? Because I think then it's between him and Avisail Garcia and left. So how all that stuff works out will be kind of interesting. But I think if the Brewers have learned anything in the last couple of years, it always pays to have plenty of guys who can play each position. Once upon a time, we were talking about the outfield being too crowded with Lorenzo Cain and Christian Yelich and Ryan Braun, but that has all worked out over the past couple of years and gotten them to the playoffs. So, um, it certainly doesn't hurt to have as many good players as you can to play each position. We'll just see how some of those guys, particularly in the infield, kind of shake into each of those positions and find their roles on this team.
Yeah, definitely. So, and then just want to ask you, what do you think? What are your predictions for like their record?
Hmm. Yeah, as far as this team, and I honestly, I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't focus on or if I didn't spend a little bit of time on the rotation as well. Kind of want to just circle back on that real quick because I skipped over a couple things. Um, in regards to the rotation going into 2018, they wanted Corbin Burns and Freddie Peralta, who, if you kind of remember in those playoffs against the Dodgers, really shined in limited time out of the bullpen. They kind of wanted those guys to be their featured guys going into 2019. Both of them struggled. Peralta had an ERA of 5.29 for the season that only got lower as he gained some traction coming out of the pen. And Corbin Burns had an ERA of 8.82 before being sent down to AAA, had an ERA north of 8 there, and was sent down to AA in August. So that's a guy who you wanted to be like a second, third guy in the rotation behind Brandon Woodruff, and completely the wheels fell off for both of those guys. So the guys that they brought in were former uh, Pirate actually in 2017, Josh Lindblom, who actually pitched in Korea last year and won the KBO MVP. So it'll be interesting to see how he transitions back to the starting rotation, as well as Brett Anderson, who they signed to a 1 year deal. So he's going to help fill out that rotation as well and provide a nice lefty for their rotation. So it'll be interesting to see how that rotation shakes out as well, because I think the Brewers have a lot of capable arms, but it'll be definitely who stands out in camp, who you know will um, will obviously make the rotation, and we'll see how that transpires throughout the year as well. So looking ahead to 2020, to answer your question in a roundabout way here, um, I honestly see this team as a team that could definitely be on the plus side of 500, and be in that 85, 88 win kind of conversation. I think again this year, whether that is enough to win the NL Central is kind of up for debate. Obviously, I think the Cardinals won it with 91
Yeah.
uh, wins last year. So I think that'll have them in the conversation again. Potentially contending for a wild card spot again. I think the burden falls pretty heavily, especially with this pitching staff and the shape it's in right now for Christian Yelich to get them there. But this guy is proven to be an absolute world beater over his first two seasons. I mean, two. I don't think in the Brewers' wildest dreams did they contend or did they expect two MVP quality years out of Christian Yelich in the first 2 years. So, I think the best news for the Brewers all offseason was that, his knee was going to be, as good as new as if nothing happened, I think was the quote that he said as the rehab went on. So, him being healthy all year, I think gives the Brewers an excellent shot to make the postseason. Um, they're not going to get a lot of complete game shutouts from their starters. They're going to have starters pitch 5 to 6 innings and rely heavily on the bullpen, even when they get good outings. As far as competing in the playoffs, I feel like this team is not quite up and down the lineup a threat to go deep in the lineups. I think that hole at third base is going to loom large, and whatever doesn't shake out on that left side of the infield as far as shortstop and third base, they're going to need big offensive years from those guys to rely on their lineup up and down the lineup to generate runs. As I mentioned, this is a team that has only made the playoffs 6 times since moving to Milwaukee in 1970. So, obviously the expectations are pretty high given the last few years and the Christian Yelich window that we're all concerned about. But it'll be interesting to see what this team is capable of. But I think they're definitely in that 85 win conversation, and it remains to be seen.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'll make my prediction. And I'm gonna throw kind of a semi hot take out there. I
Okay.
think I'm gonna say that the Brewers are gonna end up being sellers at the deadline
Really?
because
Okay.
I'm gonna I think they're gonna that starting pitching is gonna be what there's like what does them in.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have not really any like solid aces in there. They just have kind of a bunch of guys thrown together.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think Brandon Woodruff's kind of the ace of the rotation, but even he at his best is, a 2 or 3 guy in other rotations. So I think that's, a fair categorization, but sure.
Mhm. So yeah, I think I'm gonna say like somewhere around like 7. I think I'm gonna say like 80, maybe like 81 wins or something like that.
Okay. Okay.
But I think that I think I think Hader's gonna be in a big trade at the deadline, and then maybe I don't know. We'll see. Maybe a big trade that they make. But
And,
I think with that division too, it's gonna be a tough division with the Cardinals and the Reds making moves. I think I could see them finishing fourth, even behind the Cubs and the Cardinals and Reds.
absolutely. I think that, obviously that is the worst case scenario for
Yeah.
Brewers fans, but I think that is definitely a possibility. I think, Hader, Hader at the deadline would be quite the prize. That'll get a lot of traction if the Brewers are not, looking like contenders around the trade deadline is who's going to go out there and pay the high price, which long term, for the Brewers wouldn't perhaps not be the worst thing because they could get quite a haul for Hader and then, turn that around to either make, a good move or a big move next year or just fill out that farm system that is pretty depleted. Just kind of looking at their farm system, they invited a couple prospects from their minor league system in this year to camp. First round pick in 2019, Ethan Small. He's a starting pitcher out of Mississippi State, left-hander. He played single A after being drafted, but I doubt he makes the jump. And then their 2018 minor league pitcher of the year, Zac Brown, also got an invite to spring training this year. He struggled in AAA last season, and I don't see him contributing. But two other names to keep an eye on too for the bullpen, I think, are Jake Faria and Ray Black, who may not start in the majors this year, but will both have the stuff to I think to contribute later on. And even if a trade is made to maybe get rid of Hader, maybe the Brewers take a look at Ray Black as a potential closer. He's a guy who can throw upwards of 100. So it'll be interesting to see if the Brewers get some traction out of him in the bullpen this year. But as far as prospects to contribute this year, I don't think the Brewers got a lot to speak of right now. So maybe a trade at the deadline of Hader would help, boost that farm system a little bit for sure in kind of the worst case scenario if they're not contending at the deadline.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely going to be the National League. Well, I've talked about this a lot on this pod. The National League has so many teams that can contend. Like, there's like pretty much almost every team can contend for a playoff spot, and besides I guess three teams: the Marlins, Giants, Pirates. Like those are the three teams that definitely won't contend.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the Diamondbacks, as far as contending for that wild card spot, might be the team to keep an eye on even if they don't overtake the Dodgers. I think will be a significant threat to take that top wild card spot, and I think most teams could be chasing them with all the moves they made to pick up Baumgartner and Starling Marte and all those guys. That's going to be a team to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, another team is Padres too. They have all those
Oh yeah,
young guys, and
I don't envy the position that those teams are in. That's going to be a tough division, and I think you could be looking at 2, 3 teams from that division that make the playoffs alone if they don't beat up on each other. So, and I'm sure they will. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out, and I think that increases the primacy on the Brewers, taking care of their own division, because those wild card spots are going to be a tough chase, I think, this year for sure.
definitely. It's funny, we on the one last podcast we were talking about like what happens if there's like an 11-team tie or something, or an 8-team tie for the wild card.
I have no idea what the sequence of tiebreakers is for that, but that's a rabbit hole I'm interested in going down.
Yeah, that would definitely be interesting. You'd take like an extra month of the season to figure that out.
Yeah. Those game 163s are fun, but I don't really see, doing a whole nother series. Yeah, I'm sure players would not be thrilled about that kind of depth of the season for sure.
And then you would have to figure out like who the wild cards are first, and then you still have to play the wild card game. Like, damn.
That'd be a mess.
But yeah, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on the Brewers.
I mean, that's pretty much most of what I got. I think the back end of the rotation or the back end of the bullpen, I think will be kind of interesting because Hader, transitioning obviously to the primary closer role this past year after Corey Knebel went down with an injury. So once Corey comes back, I think he's on track to be ready for opening day. That'll obviously get two of that three-headed monster that the Brewers had 2 years ago, where they had Jeremy Jeffress, Corey Knebel, and Josh Hader all performing at their peak 2 years ago. You'll kind of have two of those guys back, and it'll be kind of interesting to see how the back end of that bullpen, plays out. But other than that, I think that pretty well covers the notes that I had. I don't know if you had any other questions about where the Brewers are at right now.
No, I think we covered it all. It's a good pod, so thanks for coming on again.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can do a quick plug, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Well, my day job is I'm a Trempealeau County Times associate editor. I'm just north of La Crosse, Wisconsin, and I just started my own podcast recently called Small Town BS. So be sure to check that out on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for having me on, Alex.
Yeah, no problem. And if you ever want to come on again another time for just to talk some Brewers or just baseball in general, you're always welcome.
All right. Well, that sounds good. Thanks, Alex. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you, and good luck to your Brewers for this season.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, so that's another episode in the Too Much Pod Too Much Pod Tar 30 teams and 30 pod series. So it's baseball season. It's full. We're in baseball season has the floor now after the Super Bowl. So it's gonna be all baseball every day for the rest of the year, basically. Until the season's over. So for me, anyway. But obviously too, I like basketball. So I watch basketball. And the Lakers, my team, they're going to be good this year. So they're going to be going deep in the playoffs. So
Yep. Might see my Bucks in the finals there.
yeah, Bucks would be a good matchup.
Yeah, that would be quite an entertaining one for sure.
And just a reminder, you could never have too much pot tar.